will say panic, it's a bit more intense. Worried. I mean, my mother lived in worry, you know, but worry, panic, anxiety, all these different levels of it, they're all fear, really. So if you analyze that, and what's so fascinating about Buddhist model of the mind, the Buddhist way of seeing the mind, you know, when you study it, and often we don't, but if we do, it's quite specific. And what's totally fascinating, that all the states of mind that we are so familiar with, like jealousy and anger and attachment and low self-esteem and arrogance, and we see this in ourselves, we see it in others, that we, of course, totally take, this is such a important point, we totally take them for granted, you know, meaning that they're a normal part of a normal person. We just take it for granted. So, of course, when they get serious, then we're worried about them. Then you've got a problem, we think. But the Buddha's view is really just more radical. And it's what he's basically saying, the Buddhist approach is really saying this, which is not evident if we don't study it properly. It's not immediate, evident to us, that all of these states of mind are rooted in fear. So the point is, why we want to describe all these, why does Buddhism describe all these states of mind in so much detail? It's not to rub our nose in it, because this is the interesting point now. This has to be the main point. You know, it's because he has found from his own experience, this amazing Indian man 2,500 years ago, you know, coming from this amazing Indian tradition before him. I mean, I always quote this, I keep saying it, but it's amazing. His Holiness the Dalai Lama said one time, probably says it many times, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who began the investigation into the nature of the self, the person, the mind, who we are, you know, and Buddha came out of that. So the thing is, what Buddha has found is that this stuff is not at the core of our being, which means we can change it. And all the Buddhist methods, finally, when it comes down to it, they're all meant to be instructions that lead us to the gradual diminishing, lessening, and eventually getting rid of all these unhappy states of mind. Now, that's a pretty shocking concept in our culture. I mean, you know, it's like, it is really quite serious. I joke, but I mean it. If you're a therapist and I come to you and I say, please, would you give me methods, quite literally, what I say to the Buddha, can you please give me your methods for stopping all the fears, stopping all the drama, stopping all the anger, and the jealousy, the pride, the low self-esteem forever, not just temporarily. You would laugh at me. You'd be worried about me. You give me a pill to calm me down. I'm not joking. So the difference in these presentations of the mind, of our human nature, are so radically different. But as soon as we hear it's Buddhism, we put it in the sky. It's all religion. It's different, isn't it? You know, no, it's Buddhist psychologist. It's not a joke. That's his expertise. I really mean that. But of course, so he is saying, they even talk about, you know, being, you know, free of the fears of samsara. Samsara is this Sanskrit word, you know. I don't know literally you know, the etymology of it. But being in samsara, it's not some place. I mean, we have these kind of cliched ideas, you know, you got to give up samsara, you got to leave samsara and go to nirvana. It sounds like you got to leave all the happy, exciting sex and drugs and rock and roll and go to holy old boring heaven. It's not like that. These are states of mind that Buddha's talking about. So when you've achieved your nirvana, what Buddha's saying, and that's all Buddha's methodology is to get you to that, is where you finally cut from your mind these layers and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of neurotic states of mind. And layers is an important word because they are so layered and so instinctive and so normal that we really do believe you'd be abnormal if you didn't have them. And this is why it's so shocking to hear it. But this is Buddha's view. That's what he means by nirvana, not some place like heaven. You're rid of the rubbish. And so being in samsara is being caught up in this nonsense. And being in nirvana is when you're out of it, when you cut it. So don't hold your breath. It's going to take a while. But this is the fundamental point of the nuts and bolts of Buddha's techniques, you know. Then, of course, you add to that the compassion wing, which is where you help others. So I want to talk about the fear one in relation to helping others, especially when you have times like this, you know. I'm like in America when there's uproar with the politics. I mean, everywhere it's always the same. In Scotland it's the same, isn't it? Isla, have you got Scottish freedom yet? You're still struggling for Scottish independence from the old English, aren't you? Are you one of them?
It's so boring. It's awful. Every time they get a chance, it's COVID now, but once that passes, then it's starting already. Oh, independence.
I know that's the issue in Scotland, isn't it? Well, we've all got our own issues. It's like people who don't like Mr. Trump, they're waiting for another week when Mr. Trump's gone, you know, so everyone's got a problem. So the thing is, though, in these times when things, this is where we notice our fears, and you think about this. So when everything's normal, I mean, when everything's lovely, let's say you've got a nice house and the hubby's kind and the kids are well behaved and the money's in the bank and the food is there and the job is lovely and the drive home is pleasant. That's what we mean by a happy life, speaking real simple. Forget about, extra special things, just having everything nice. So this is where the Buddhist analysis of things really comes in, but it's initially a bit shocking. We'd simply say, oh, I'm having a happy life. Everything's going nicely. Now, when everything's going nicely, that means, doesn't it, there's not much anger, not much attachment, that you notice, not much anxiety, no panic, no worries, no fears. That's what it means. So they're sort of down beneath. Now, Buddha's telling us that until we're pretty highly advanced, until we've achieved this nirvana, and it's not another place, it's your own mind, it's just a temporary respite from the anger, the depression, the anxiety, the fears. It's there, but we don't pay attention. And because we're such junkies for everything to be lovely, we think, oh, I'm really happy, everything's nice. But we're not looking deep enough, he says. And then we all know the moment even the smallest thing goes wrong. I even make a joke, and I just joke, so it sounds so ridiculous, when you drop a cup while you're washing the dishes, nothing. But look what happens to the mind. Look what happens. The anxiety was asleep and suddenly it's awoke. Oh, I shouldn't have broken a cup, and you get mad at yourself. That's just a tiny thing. And the thing is, the Buddhist view is with your mind, nothing ever goes astray. One Lama said it's like we're shooting a movie all day. And of course, Buddha tells us we're coming from past lives. So our mind is got a storehouse of movies. And then when you meet a certain condition, that movie will come up to play, So everything is stored in our mind. So then everything we do doesn't go astray. So that broken cup and the annoyance that arose, that annoyance is a mild version of anger. Because why? Because you didn't get what you wanted, because no one likes breakups. No one wants things to be bad. We all are junkies for nice things, and that's attachment's job. So it doesn't seem like a problem. Attachment doesn't seem like a problem until it doesn't get what it wants. And that's when the problems start. That's why, like, if you've got some disease where the sun burns you terribly, it's just there. But if you're never in the sun, you won't notice the problem, will you? You'll only notice the problem when you go in the sun. Well, that's not attachment. Attachment feels like it's normal. But the minute it doesn't get what it wants, the minute it meets a problem, that's when the dramas start. That's when the anxiety, the upset, the hurt, the fears, the jealousy, the worries. And then, of course, we all see with some people, they get completely out of control, I mean, some people just live in this constant state of uncertainty and panic and worried, making up dramas as we go along. This is what we all do, So fear then, this is what I'm trying to get at here. Fear, the Buddhist approach is so fascinating that fear, this gripping, of discomfort, gripping tight, is the character of all those states of mind. So this is very odd initially, because we'll think of fear as quite a specific thing. But if you see a person, let's say some kid or any person shouting, eyes wide in horror, tears coming out of the eyes, words spitting out the mouth, irrational words, and you see them from a distance. Now, you can't tell, can you? And listen to my point here, that you don't know if they're having a panic attack. You don't know if they're having a seizure. You don't know if they're being angry. It all depends. You get closer and you can go, oh, look, oh, she's just getting angry. Oh, that's just getting angry. Look at that. But what do you think they are? They're having a complete mental breakdown. Please hear it carefully. They're having a complete panic attack. They're freaking out. But we wouldn't call it fear. We'd call it anger. But look at it. It's driven by, it's dripping in, its character is fear. They're completely hysterical. That could not have happened. How dare that happen to me? That is called fear. That's the nature of all the unhappy states of mind. So then when you've gotten to the point where you've even just lessened these neurotic states of mind, and this is not going to happen overnight, I promise, you've got to work very hard at it, then that means necessarily you become more stable, less fearful, less up and down like a yo-yo, less neurotic, less anxious, less worried. And that's what we have to learn to do for our own sake, because you're going to meet, guaranteed, you're going to meet conditions that will upset you. You'll break the cup. Husband won't answer you in the right way. The traffic out there's no good. COVID-19 comes, thousands of people dying every day, poor people on the streets. You've got a job where you're dealing with the suffering people. If you haven't got some stability in your own mind, if you haven't got some clarity and some confidence that you can navigate your own mind and your broken cups, then how in the name of goodness can you possibly navigate suffering out there? It will drag you to hell. And that's when people lose the plot, you know. So the compassion wing is the point. Compassion to help others is the point. But as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, it's not enough. You've got to do the wisdom wing. And that's the work of the nuts and bolts of working on your own mind. And this just sounds mystical to us. It's not, though. It's hard work. That means you've got to know your own mind. It means you've got to own what's there. And that's not comfortable because we're addicted to blaming the outside world, you know. It's the husband's fault and it's my fault and it's not my fault. It's this fault and the weather's fault and COVID-19's fault and Mr. Trump's fault and whatever it is. There's always something out there. But the Buddhist approach to it, which is very powerful, seems simple, but this is the best approach. This is the most powerful one. The bad weather does happen. You did break the cup. The husband did say the wrong words. There is COVID-19. There are lousy politics. There are poor people. Now, we tend to think in our analysis that they're the problem. That's the problem, we'll say. No, they're not the problem. They're the catalyst. There is a problem there for those people, but for us, that's merely a catalyst for me to have a problem. So it's up to me to work on this part here, by changing, reconfiguring how I see things, how I think about things, what I want, you know, my expectations. And that's what's giving up attachment, giving up anger, giving up anxiety, giving up jealousy, gradually, not overnight, I promise. It's a hard job. Then that allows you to be more stable and more able to be a benefit to others. Now, we know, like during COVID-19, you see it in all the papers and all this in the television news and the iPad, whatever, that there's so many more stories now of people doing wonderful things to help other people, you know. And we're always so moved by that. So it's really true. You can have one person who's responding to COVID-19, freaking out, anxiety, can't get a job. I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm just looking at our minds. And they're kind of like lonely, no one to help them. And another person who's just as poor, I'm not criticizing now. We can see different people like this. This person is thinking, what can I do to help? And they're out there helping other people. So, I mean, in a way, not in a way, that is a really special quality. And that you has to imply that if a person, when you look at the same problem and one person feels upset about it and gets upset and anxious and worried and angry for themselves, and another person goes, what can I do to help? That's pretty stupendous, you know. I mean, that's the thing interesting for me, like with politics. I always quote Martin Luther King. I remember when I was an old radical lefty, you know, political activist in my 20s and 30s. No, 20s. I became a Buddhist in my 30s. In my 20s, that's right. And so I remember, you know, there I was seeing suffering in the world, seeing all the poor people, seeing all the black suffering. I mean, I was very involved in all the black politics back in the time of the, whatever reason, there was a particular group I was involved with. The feminist politics, the suffering in the world, that's not changed. It's just got different labels now. Look at it, you know. That never changes as long as human nature, as long as you've got anger and attachment, you're going to have suffering. There's no question. But back then, for me, I was all this noble, you know, running out there, demonstrating, trying to make the world a better place. So what I'm getting at is, now I forgot what I was getting at. Yeah, there's all these problems out there. They're real problems. You can never say they're not real problems. Of course, they're real problems. Suffering, racism, sexism, crazy people, white supremacists, maniacs, conspiracy theorists who think Satan is running the world or something. I mean, these demented ideas, you can't believe that human beings even can think them. So the world's demented. It's all there. And since beginning of this time, read history, wherever you like, you're going to see it, you know. That's called suffering out there. So I remember Martin Luther King said, it's good to be angry. And he meant it's good to find fault. You must see the problems out there. Look at the racism. Look at the suffering. But then he said then you say, what can I do to help? That's what compassion is. Now, that's the compassion wing. But think about this. And I can see back then, because I hadn't dealt with my own mind. I didn't even know about that until I met these Tibetan lamas. I thought, you know, when I always joke, the Catholics, I mean, I love my Catholic upbringing, but the Catholics with the non-Catholics with the problem, and the straight people with the problem, and the rich people with the problem, the white people with the problem, the males with the problem. It's still the same, those categories. Now we're finally pointing out white men are the problem. You think about, I have to make jokes now, but it's not a joke. This is really incredible. I think it's amazing. Finally now in the world, there's an awareness that there's a group of people called white men. Do you understand my point here, people? White men have been the default mode. White men has been a normal person. Think about this. I'm sorry, George, you're a white man. It's okay, though. Think about this. It's fascinating. That's why the Capitol, they just saw a bunch of crazy white men. And white men are normal. But if it had been a black man or a crazy woman or an Arab, can you imagine they would have been all slaughtered? Because everybody's just, the default mode on this planet, this is a very fascinating point, is a white male. But now the world is changing, and now they're actually pointing out a group called white men. It's like shocking for the world. It was always a black person, because the default mode was a white man, and anything opposite to that was a group. But now we're realizing there's a group called white men who are the problems. Excuse me, George. Any of you men. But hear my point, it's very fascinating. Anyway, that's my political analysis there. Or the way we label things, isn't it? So anyway, the point is, as Martin Luther King said, so then for me, I had lots of anger, you know. So how dare they do this and out there demonstrating, feeling so noble. But I could realize, since when I met the lamas, I met the Dharma, and they're trying to work on my mind, I still want to help the world. That's not changed. But the difference is maybe I got a bit less angry, a bit less neurotic, a bit less jealous, a bit less up and down like a yo-yo. So then you're qualified to help others. And that's the point. That's what I loved about Martin. I didn't like him then. I was a bit of a radical. I preferred Malcolm X, you know. But Martin Luther King's amazing. He could see the problems, but he wasn't angry. He was stable. His mind was more stable. So then you're more capable of not losing the plot, not being overwhelmed by fear, not panicking, not getting anxious. Because they're all the symptoms of attachment. Attachment is this multifaceted state of mind that it's like a joke to talk this way, because we don't talk like this in modern psychology, you know. It's the function of this emotional hunger in us to get what I want. It's totally self-centered. Don't feel bad about it. We've all got it. And its function is to make the second, like, you know, if everything's going nice in the house, you think you're a happy person. You think you're lovely and happy. There's no anxiety, but you just drop a cup and you have a mental breakdown. Can you imagine? You see all the suffering out there, you're going to lose the plot completely. That's why we lose the plot. That's why we can't help other people, because we get angry, we get upset, because attachment's not getting what it wants. It's a profound analysis, actually, but we just don't read it in such a casual way in the Buddhist text, you know. Attachment is this emotional hunger in us that runs everything. It's like the potential is always there to be burned by the sun, but you only, when you meet the sun, do you get burned. Well, this potential to always be upset is always there. As long as attachment's getting what it wants, you feel everything's cool. But the second it doesn't get what it wants, you drop the cup, the bad thing happens, you get irritated, the phone rings when you don't want it, you get upset, anxiety comes. Oh, I better answer the phone. Oh, it's ringing, you know, blah, blah. No, let it ring, doesn't matter. I never use the phone normally, but now I have this wretched phone that never stops ringing all day. So then the second attachment doesn't get what it wants, we get distressed, you know. That's what anxiety, worry. And then, of course, if you're a mummy, I mean, my mother lived in worry. I mean, she had 7 children. I don't blame her, the poor thing. No money, a crazy husband, you know. Of course she was worried. And you can't stop it. It's incredible. Actually, one of my sisters has 7 children, and it's hilarious hearing how she gets worried about her children. She said, you know, one of her daughters left home. And, you know, she's a perfectly fine daughter. She's not a junkie or anything, living in a nice apartment. My sister was compelled to sneak in the car at night to go around and check the apartment. She couldn't stop herself. I mean, she wouldn't, I mean, you must be mothers. You must know. Mothers are unbelievable. And this is from attachment, when you just can't allow it to be the way it is. Attachment is multifaceted. Attachment is emotional hunger. No, before that, attachment is dissatisfaction. And we have that quite badly. And Lama Zopa says it's the main disease in the West, you know. It's the energy of attachment, never having enough, never got enough, always wanting more, no matter what I've got, not enough. That's a very painful disease. And not everybody's got it seriously, but we've got it pretty badly. So that's the first level of attachment, never enough. Then, of course, because you've never got enough, you're looking for something out there, you hanker. So that's the emotional hunger. So looking for something out there to fill up the hole. Then you exaggerate its deliciousness. Then you manipulate to get it. Then you control to get it. And then you control to keep it. And then control it. Control freak, that's attachment, you know. Needy, that's attachment. Expectations, that's attachment. Anticipating, thinking all the time. Attachment also has the capacity to always think about the past and think about the future. Attachment also, and that's the worried aspect, is always anticipating problems. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if that happens? I mean, that can make people completely go crazy. All of that's a function of this constant, never stopping chatting in the mind, you know. It's really quite profound, the levels of it. In the way, initially Buddhism talks about it very simply, but as we progress, we get to see it ever more deeply, ever more deeply, ever more deeply, you know. And this is the root of actually what fear is, and panic, all of them. So as we lessen attachment, which means we become more content, which means we lessen the hankering and the manipulating and the controlling and the possessing, you don't just become boring, you become more content. And then you open the door to be more empathetic to others, and it doesn't freak you out. So then people who've got this ability, to want to help, they see instead of seeing it as something to upset you, they see it as something, what can I do to help? That's what Martin Luther King said. And that was so profound. It's so simple, but profound, The other one would have been, like to get mad at it and kick and yell and scream and sounding like you're noble. No, he said, what can I do? It's good to see faults, but what can I do to help? That's compassion. That's incredible. But if you're overwhelmed by your own misery, if you're overwhelmed by your own anxiety and fears, you can't even help a fly, That's why the wisdom wing's got to come first. Compassion is not enough. And until we really think about this, it doesn't make sense to us in the West. Often we think of the wisdom wing. I remember there's a conference a month ago I participated in Sydney online. They have them regularly in Sydney, these happiness and its causes. They often have a couple of thousand people come, and it was online this time. And so there's a little panel, and of me and 3 other people, all lovely people, lovely human beings, all giving out a 15-minute panel about how you deal with, your own stuff, so that you can get out there and help others, And so I suddenly realized that the normal way we think about it in the West is you go out there, you do your job, you work for others, you help the poor people, you raise the money, you help the sick, you help the dying, whatever you might do out there, and you get home and you're exhausted. So more than anything, what we think that the other thing for ourselves has to be, we've got to have a massage, relax, take care of ourselves, have a hot bath. True, there's no question we must do that. But the Buddhist approach is it's more to it than merely taking care of yourself so you can get out there and help others. You've got to change your mind. You've got to work on your mind. Because why we get exhausted helping others is because we've got attachment. You see, attachment, again, is this junkie in the mind, this junkie that's frantic to only get the nice things. So when the attachment part of us sees the suffering, when the compassion part of us sees the suffering people, that's incredible. You want to help. But we don't only have a compassion. Our compassion is also mixed with our attachment. So the attachment part of us can't stand seeing that suffering. It upsets me. I don't want to see suffering. It upsets my peace of mind because attachment is totally self-centered. So that pollutes the compassion, and that's why you get dragged down to hell. And I mean, this is human beings. When you're in those hospitals and people are dying like flies from COVID-19, of course you're exhausted. When you keep helping poor people, but more people keep coming, and there's never an end to it, of course you're going to get exhausted. And that's why if we can imagine what a bodhisattva is, and the best word in the West is saint. It sounds so peculiar to us, especially if we're secular people. To hear of a saint sounds ridiculous. But it's a person. A bodhisattva is a person who's given up to an incredible degree the attachment, the neediness, the anger, the anxiety, the fears, the jealousy. That is gone. And if they've realized emptiness, if they've achieved their own nirvana plus the compassion, they don't have that fear anymore. This is really hard for us to comprehend, but it's possible. Psychologically, it doesn't sound sane, but this is what's possible. This is what's possible. Then when you're like that, you don't have a separate sense of a miserable me to get upset. So you're blissfully content, you're joyful in your own mind, just naturally, you can't not be. You don't have attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, all these are gone. You don't have fears, it's gone. Hard to imagine, but this is what the Buddhist view is saying. So then what is there space for in your mind is only to help others. So when you hear about these bodhisattvas, you can't believe it's true, I mean, I think even the Dalai Lama is such a good example. He acts like such a normal person. We don't see him as unusual in a way, but I mean, if you think about his life, I find him such a practical example. He's not 85 now. 86 this year, I think. He was born in 35. So he's 86 this year. Okay, so when he was 15, he took over running the country. 15. He was 15 when all this drama. In 1950, when all the Chinese communists came barging into the country saying it was theirs and destroying people, he took the job of running the country. He's been the boss of the Tibetans, since then. Can you imagine, 15 years old? So the burden of the weight, the burden of taking responsibility for these 6 million people, dealing with these Chinese communists, negotiating with all his government, making all these decisions, since he's 15, as well as doing all his studies, he became a geshe and this amazing scholar. So since then, and as we know, he left the country in 59, And since then, he hasn't stopped. He hasn't stopped since he's born, since he's 15, in trying to solve the problems. First of all, of his own people, never stopped for 60, 70, that's 70 years. He hasn't stopped working to help the Tibetan country, trying to find peace. He never gives up. And that's the enthusiasm. They talk about enthusiasm. They talk about joyful effort of the Bodhisattva. The only way you can have that enthusiasm, never to be dragged down by the despair of things going wrong, is because you've got enthusiasm. And you can only have that level of enthusiasm if you haven't got attachment, haven't got anger, haven't got depression, haven't got anxiety. I mean, this is what's possible. So to see examples like him, it gives us such courage to know, wow, if he can do it, I can do it too, What are the methods he used? I'm going to try them. So he hasn't stopped for 70 years, and not just spiritually, but diplomatically, socially, scientifically. He's involved in every major part of the world, still perky and happy and confident and optimistic and cracking jokes about the Chinese communists. And he's 85, So we can't, it's easy for us to go, oh, that's just the Dalai Lama. Oh, he's a saint. That's insulting. He's worked hard to get there. Well, it shows we can do it too. And that's why we should be confident. If you can see one human being out there who can be like that, surely that's the proof that I can do it too. That should give us immense confidence. And then, of course, be humble, work slowly according to our own pace, do what we can, but know we're a work in progress. I think it's so important. What you're doing as a Buddhist, as Lama Zopa says, we can mold our mind into any shape we like. That's our job of being a Buddhist, We can mold our mind into any shape we like. This is the job to be done. So that's the wisdom wing. Got to first control your body and speech and don't go around, killing people and stuffing too many cakes in, and discipline your body and speech, first level of practice. Then you start to be your own therapist and unpack and unravel the stuff in here. And then the compassion wing. It's one step at a time, and you just keep getting better and better. But part of the tragedy, isn't it, of our ego, the irony of ego is we think we're set in stone. We think this is who I am, I'm angry, I'm this, I can't do this. We're set in stone, But we're not. We're a work in progress. There's nothing that's not possible, one step at a time. To have that confidence is so important, And that confidence also demands the courage to own what is in our mind, to own that's my anger, it's my jealousy. Yeah, the boyfriend is a creep. That's his problem. What's mine? Don't just dump responsibility, or have guilt. That's the other extreme. We love to be guilty, but guilty is just anger, but you're the object, and that's a disaster. Take responsibility for what's there. Because if you can't identify the problem, how can you solve it? If you keep thinking the boyfriend's the only thing that's the problem, you'll never solve your problem. The anger is the problem. The anxiety is the problem. The jealousy is the problem. The depression. These are our problem. These are why we are in pain, Not to be guilty about it. Guilt is the problem. Guilt is just paralysis. Guilt, there's no accountability with guilt, But what can I do to change? That's the attitude, So you see the problem, you're not set in stone, it doesn't define you, it's miserable. Yes, it's miserable, but you can change it. So that's what brings confidence, and we have to have that. Otherwise, we'll get exhausted when we see the suffering world. So we've got to work on our own mind first. We've got to reconfigure, and then to that degree, you can help others, and you keep increasing both wings of the bird. This is the bottom line, really. I don't know. I've raved on a bit. Ask me some questions. 1:30. It's 3:35 for you in New York, and it's 1:35 for me here in Santa Fe. Are there any questions?
Yeah, one came in through the chat, Venerable. Can you please explain again the relationship between fear and anger?
Absolutely.
I thought it was ignorance that held anger and attachment, or is it fear, or is it that fear is equivalent to ignorance?
Exactly. Fear, the root. Okay, we've got to describe this Buddhist little model here, and you're right in what you're saying. So the Buddha would talk about actually thousands of neurotic states of mind. They've got this whole map of the mind, it's very fascinating. And this is several thousand years old. It wasn't invented by Freud, I promise you. This is Buddhist, and before that was the Hindus. They're amazing. So the thing is, but as we all know by reading the Buddhist teachings, you're going to read about the 3 poisons, and it sounds so cute. I mean, you don't go to your therapist, I've got the 3 poisons. I'll tell you, shut up and go home. So we've got to take it seriously. What do they mean by these 3? Well, these 3 states of mind, deceptively simple, not how we talk in modern psychology. And even though we could speak about them 1,000 times, I think about it all the time. I talk about it all the time. It's my job. Every time I talk about it, I get a bit deeper understanding. Every time, all these years. So there's 3 main ones, and there's a hierarchical relationship. And you're right, the root one is called ignorance. It's a simple word, but it's got a very profound kind of double meaning. The Buddha is basically telling us that we not only don't know how reality is, which sounds very abstract for us, how things exist ultimately is how they talk. Not only do we not know how things exist, but we've actually got a completely mistaken view about it on top of the mistake. So it's a bit like, what's that color, Robina? And I'll say, I don't know. Well, that's simple ignorance. You can fix that pretty quickly. You can tell me it's white. Now I've got the wisdom. But if I think it's blue, then that's double ignorance. Not only do I don't know the truth, I believe in a lie. And that's what Buddha's saying about all these unhappy states of mind. They've got this particular function, ignorance more than anything, all of them. But as Lama Zopa says, all these unhappy states of mind, all these neurotic states of mind, all these delusions, as Buddhism calls them, all these they're in their root, they're misconceptions. But because they're so emotional, we don't notice that component, which is more subtle, more underneath, So, as Lama Zopa says, because remember, Buddhism distinguishes between the neurotic, deluded, fear-based states of mind and the valid, reasonable, optimistic, virtuous, positive, good states of mind. And that's not moralistic. These are practical terms. So the virtuous, positive ones are rooted in reality to some degree. They're connected to others. They're optimistic. They're compassionate. That's called empathy, love, kindness, generosity. We know those states of mind. We want more and more of that. The other lot, they diminish things, they're freaked out, they're rooted in fear. The point is they're rooted in fear, especially the root one, ignorance. They're liars. They misrepresent the world to us. So as Lama Zopa says, all these delusions, what they do is, for example, when anger is functioning in my mind, when it's prevailing, and the boyfriend is the object, the anger in my mind, we know this is true. The anger in my mind, what it's doing is decorating on top of the boyfriend layers and layers of characteristics that aren't there. And the characteristics are called ugliness and bad and blame and how dare and wrong. So anger makes the boyfriend look ugly. Now, if I'm attached to my boyfriend and in love with him, then that attachment will decorate on top of the boyfriend deliciousness. And in attachment's case, it over-exaggerates his deliciousness. In anger's case, it over-exaggerates his ugliness. Now, we know this all day, but we don't analyze it like this. We just take it for granted. So these are the function of all these unhappy emotions. So the root delusion, there are three. The main poison, the three poisons, the three toxic emotions. The root one is quite hard for us to hear. It's quite abstract for us, but it's the main one. It's the deepest, most primordial misconception, emotional problem that is deeply instinctive, deeply primordial. We can't ever hear the voice that it says, It's clear when you analyze attachment that it really does exaggerate the deliciousness of the cake. The cake really isn't like that. You make it more delicious than it is. When you calm down your anger, you realize your boyfriend isn't as bad as you thought. That's because the mind calmed down. Now, the ignorance is what underpins both of those. And it's the deepest lie. And it's this intrinsic, it's a deep, and it's a sleeping lion most of the time. So it's the deepest primordial feeling of a separate, concrete, miserable, kind of concrete me set in stone. And it only arises when we're really offended or insulted or upset. It's like then the lion wakes up. I did not do that. I am not like that. How dare you insult me? This powerful feeling of this me that's separate and bereft and lonely and miserable. And attachment is its main voice, this emotional hunger to get what that fantasy me wants. And then anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what the fantasy I wants. That's the relationship between the three. And they're running the show all day. They're so automatic. They're ancient. Buddha says they're totally programmed from lifetimes of habit to the point where they're instinctive, which is why we just take them for granted in our culture, psychologically and neuroscientifically. So, the only time that the ego, the term for this ignorance is ego, the colloquial term, when it relates to me, it's ego grasping. It's a very tasty ego grasping. So when that's rampant is when bad things happen. Your boyfriend just leaves you. You nearly get run over by a car. Your heart literally is beating. That is the personification of fear, isn't it? Well, that's there all the time, but quietly. And it's just so natural we don't notice it. So they're all rooted in fear. But the main one, that is the most primordial fear, is the fear of I being left, I being insulted, I being attacked. And attachment is this hunger to protect that I, and then anger is a panic attack when it doesn't get it. So they're all, of course, they're rooted in fear. If ignorance is the root delusion and it's rooted in fear, its voice is fear, then of course attachment and anger and all the other thousands are all rooted in fear. How can they not be? So, but just forget about that theory. Please look at the person shouting when they're angry. Look at their eyes wide open. You see a photo of a person angry. Their eyes are wide in horror. What do you think they're experiencing? It's the panic of I being attacked. What do you think? It's called anger, though. I mean, how can we not think that there's fear in that person's mind? They're freaking out. They can't even put two sentences together. They're so hysterical. They're like having a panic attack. It is a panic attack. Think about it. But we're so used to calling, oh, that's just anger, you know. We're used to calling it that. But the person is completely the opposite to calm. The opposite to, they're completely hysterical, completely panicked, completely worried, full of fear, you name it. No wonder people kill each other. Of course, it's fear. It's bones, but fear is in the bones of anger and attachment and the primordial deepest one. All the delusions are rooted in fear. And that's why, as Ami Yeshe says in his wonderful Mahamudra book that came out last year, when we have, quote unquote, realized emptiness, when we have cut the root of the fantasy I, when we have seen the truth, there is no intrinsic, independent, separate I. It's a fabrication. Never has, doesn't, and never could exist. That's when eventually you achieve your nirvana. Then what do you think your mind's like? You'd be in bliss. You'd be in joy. I mean, this sounds so hilarious to us. It means you wouldn't have fears. You would not. Fears are gone. The fears of samsara, they call them. Tara, the female Buddha, she's often referred to as the liberator from the fears of samsara. She's like courage and optimism and action energy and getting things done and cutting through the problems and cutting through the fears. Optimism, courage, you know. Psychologically it makes such sense, but it's not our analysis, and it takes time to think of it like this. It takes, because it's a very different analysis, the Buddhist one. Unless we study it, we're not going to know this, you know. I hope that answers the question. A long answer. What else? What else is there, Teresa?
Just passing through the photos to see if anyone has their hand up. I have a question if there isn't any.
Good. You ask me.
Okay, great. I was really compelled by when you're speaking of like having this compassion, like a bodhisattva, you know, you just have a clear state of mind and all that's left is helping somebody. And it made me think about empathy and like my definition or what I've learned is empathy. And empathy, I've learned in my practice when I work with clients, like I learned that, and I practice sort of feeling somebody else's pain because that helps me to have, it opens up this doorway in my heart to like really feel what they're experiencing and to have that compassion. So it made me think about, I'm just curious to hear you speak about that relationship between empathy and compassion.
Well, I know that I noticed. I mean, I don't know much about. I don't know much about many of the different Buddhist psychological, the material, the current Buddhist. Sorry, the non-Buddhist psychological models. I don't know much, but I certainly have heard from different people that empathy and compassion are defined differently. But all I can say is, you know, that in the Buddhist view, they're just synonyms. And what compassion is, what empathy or compassion. That's why empathy is a good word, I think. It is exactly that. That's the point, Teresa. So think of it like this. You've got the deluded neurotic states of mind. This distinction is quite unique to the Buddhist model. And then you've got the positive virtuous states of mind. So the key characteristic of the negative ones is they're necessarily I-based, separate me, lonely, bereft I. Don't hear this as bad. It's just how we are, you know, and it's our suffering. It's why we suffer. And that means the stronger my attachment to get what I want, the stronger my own view of me, the more blind I am to another person. So you all know if you're so completely overwhelmed by your own attachment for something, just to even get to something, you can't see others necessarily. You're blind to another person's needs. But if you go into work one day and your boyfriend just left you and you're beyond devastated and you're angry and fearful, you can hardly even hear your client talk. you understand my point? You'd be exhausted by hearing their boring old problems. You wish they'd shut up so you can go home and deal with your own problems. Or if you're really overwhelmed by your own depression and your headache, and you try to, like in Rosanna's job, she helped poor people, and you can't even see their problems. You wish they'd all go away so you can go home and have your dinner. This is normal behavior. And why we're like that is because we're overwhelmed by our own misery. Don't put yourself down because of it. This is how it is. So as you lessen your neediness and you become more fulfilled, just by you becoming more fulfilled, there's space now to see others more clearly. So of course you will feel their pain. You might even be in tears, but in the West, we nervous about that. We think that you're getting involved. But a bodhisattva will feel the pain of others, but they won't be dragged down by it. They will give them the power to want to help. And the fact is, listen to this one. This is very shocking for us. This is not, Lama Zopa said one time, and this is what this indicates, it seems to me, is the degree of subtlety that our mind can go to, and the degree of ridding the mind of self-centeredness and ego grasping and attachment and anger, that you can have such empathy. And he said, if you could just for a moment have a direct experience, not of the poor suffering person in front of you, not of the alcoholic, not of the poor person, but an ordinary dog who we think is cute. He said the mental suffering would be so unbearable, you'd never want to waste another second of this precious human life. Now, that is beyond shocking to us, because even when we think of suffering now, Teresa, we just think we see poor people, sick people, dying people, people in pain. We only see the grossest level of suffering. We don't see the mind of a person, So forget about the mind of a dog. That's an impossibility for us. So this indicates to me that, Lama Zopa must be a yogi, because these great yogi meditators who've gone beyond all the delusions, they've got literal clairvoyance. They can see exactly the mind and they can feel it as if it their own, but it doesn't destroy them. It gives them courage and optimism to continue to be of benefit to others. Because the reason it drags us down when we see others suffering is the indication of our own attachment and anger. And that's not trying to criticize us. It's a technical explanation. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
compassion are exactly that. But, it doesn't mean, see, our trouble is we then think I've got to be broken by that. It's got to break me. That's why we think we can't have too much empathy. But if you haven't got much attachment and you have that empathy and you spend time helping others, but when they've gone, you're still whole. It doesn't destroy you. Dalai Lama, you can still see he's got this powerful sense of his own being, is my way of putting it in Western terms. But he's got empathy like everybody who's ever met that person. We did various issues of Mandala magazine over the years, I met him I remember in 1982, even Lama Yeshe, he was one of the people who invited the Dalai Lama to Europe, to Italy, Spain, and France. And Lama, in his wonderful way, he appointed 10 of us to be the security guards for His Holiness, 5 men and 5 women. And I was one of them. I thought I'd won the lottery. I couldn't believe it. And Lama made us wear these uniforms, So we had uniforms and I had hair and I put my lippy on and I had my lipstick on, right? I was a nun, but I had my hair. And Lama kept laughing in the voice. I like you better looking like that, he said. Anyway, never mind. But we traveled with His Holiness for 2 months. It was a revelation for me more than anything, was seeing the effect he had on people. It was mind-boggling. He doesn't walk around looking like a holy person. He's funny. He cracks jokes. He whacks people on the back. He's funny, But everywhere we went, I never forget, especially in Spain and Italy, Spain and Italy, we met Catholic monks. He went to these monasteries. He loves these Catholic meditators, So one monastery in Spain, the girls weren't allowed in because it was only for men. Never mind, what to do, it's life. So we stayed outside. But when they all came out, and Lama Yeshe was there, and then all the boys who were in our team of 10 people and other people, and these monks, these Catholic monks who spend all the Carthusians or something, they spend all their day praying in meditation. And they were in bliss talking to the Dalai Lama. They were in bliss talking to him because this unbelievable connection. He met the Pope. Everybody, everywhere I went, I remember there's people in tears everywhere they went. And he's just being as a regular guy. In Italy, when we invited, the Dalai Lama gave a big talk, a big conference in our center in Italy. About 700 people came every day. And I had the job, I mean, he was so kind to us. I had the job of guarding His Holiness's little house, you know, and then the real terrorist squad guards would come along with their big machine gun. The terrorist squad coppers came along, and initially these young Italian guys, all these arrogant macho Italian guys with their machine guns, looking so cynical at this ridiculous-looking Tibetan man. But after 10 days, he had them in the palm of his hand. They just loved him. I saw it in Sydney when we invited him there, and all these people for 3 months he was there. And these Australian police who were put on his detail, they just were moved to tears by this person, everybody. And he acted normal. So, I mean, all I can say is a person who's powerful, charismatic, sees, and all the suffering he talks about, he touches everybody. There's this incredible kindness there, and that's the consequence of getting rid of delusions. You know, the feeling was he's so powerful but so compassionate, but he's never broken by it. When he would talk about his Tibetan people coming in, you know, or even talking about the way the country's been destroyed environmentally, he'd be in tears. He was in tears when his mother died, but next minute he's cracking jokes. Because when you've rid your mind of ego grasping, when you've rid the attachment and anger and jealousy, you can't be ripped apart. You have unbelievable empathy, but you're powerful and strong, and you can never be destroyed. Because it's attachment and delusions and depression and anxiety and jealousy that destroy us, you know. And that's the amazing view in Buddhism, that you can rid your mind of that. And even our own lives, we can see the degree to which we can be empathetic to others and not be destroyed by it is the degree to which you've got less attachment, less jealousy, less depression, less neurosis. And this is why we've got to grow all the time. The wisdom wing becomes stronger and clearer, and then you help others. But you don't bring the junk with you. I know even a little bit that what I learned from working with people in prison, you know, incredible suffering. Especially in this country, it's a nightmare of suffering with incredible sentencing laws and incredible injustice of, innocent people being accused, innocent people dying, you know. And there's so much. I mean, when I was a radical lefty, I would have killed the people if I'd had that. But now as a Buddhist, I'd do whatever I could. I'd meet these people. I'd give them respect. I'd give them, you know, I'd be optimistic. I'd be kind. But then I walked out the door. It didn't drag me down. You know, it didn't drag me down. Because you give what you can, you respect people, it's their life, it's their suffering. But if you bring your own emotional stuff into it, it just becomes yucky, you know. And also you don't last. As His Holiness said with anger even, I remember one journalist said, anger seems really helpful, it makes you act to change things. And His Holiness said, I know what you mean, but when it's only anger that makes you act, it doesn't last, you give up, you don't care after a while. But if it's compassion, you never give up, you know, because it doesn't destroy you. I'm just talking here. Now it's 5:02.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was so helpful.
But also we've got to know where we're at, Therese. If we're not like His Holiness, we're not like Lama Zopa, who can not sleep and works day and night. We've got to know where we're at, you know. So have your good sleep, have a massage, relax, keep working on your mind. But remember that relaxing and having a massage, you can have them till the cows come home. It'll never make you feel less neurotic. Working on your mind makes you feel less neurotic. Working on your attachment and your anger and your fears, that's the wisdom wing. That's a very specific job, you know.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Good, darling.
Yeah.
Any more questions there?
Yeah, there's one that came through from Mary. What's the first step to rid yourself of ego grasping?
Oh, the first step, darling. God, it's in the structure of the path. That's the final job. That's university level. So the first, what's happened here? My strange thing happened. Oh, okay. Nothing happened. So the first step is to start, I mean, the long term, okay, I'll give you the rough of the whole path. The first step is, given that we're driven by delusions and we're completely uncontrolled, the first step is control the servants of your delusions, which is control your body and speech. Live in vows, do lots of purification, and control your body and speech. Then you get to high school, and now you can, because you calmed your body and speech down to some degree, now you can begin to unpack and unravel your mind, like I've been talking here, to really begin to see your mind clearly and recognize the delusions and distinguish them from the virtues. Then that gets you to renunciation of suffering and its causes, and already you're amazing. Then you go to the compassion when you start to cultivate compassion and bodhicitta. Then you get to the 6 perfections, and you perfect those compassion parts, and then in your meditation, you now are ready to uproot the delusion called ego grasping by realizing emptiness. That's the path from junior school to postgraduate. No, that's junior school to university. Okay, that comes last. But every time you chip away at controlling your body, you're chipping away at attachment, which means you're chipping away at ego grasping. Every time you chip away at attachment, you're chipping away at ego grasping. And then eventually you get right to ego grasping. That's the root. You got to get the branches down first, you know. That's the answer. Time to go home. Yes?
I think we're on till 4:30 if you
Oh, are we?
want to
2
be
hours?
with us.
Oh, okay.
No, an hour and a half.
No problem. Go. Keep going.
Yeah, great.
Any more questions then?
None right now that's come through on the chat, but if anyone would like to raise their hand.
Wait a minute. What is the time now in New York?
It's almost 4 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. All right. So any more questions there, folks? George, yes, George. Good, darling. Yes, talk to me.
Venerable Robina, thank you so much. I'm delighted to see you. I have a question, something nagging in me for quite a while, which is more in terms of mental factor and the creative mind. And
Yes.
the effect of, we know that over the century of our history, of human history, suffering has produced incredible art. It's because
Exactly.
that you create, from music to painting and etc.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I hear the effect of the creative mind in Dharma, with Dharma. It seems dissociated. There is no. Could you try to straighten me up?
I know you. I mean, I've been having this. I had this discussion with Sheila, so it must have been coming with. You've had it with her, maybe, or that's accidental. But she asked the same question. Anyway, that's interesting. It really does need a good analysis, George. So we have to go into it. Okay. So okay. So the mental factors, this is a term for people to know. In the Buddhist analysis of the mind, when we learn about the contents of the mind, it's a really extensive texts and a really detailed analysis of all these thousands of different precise different states of mind. It's very precise, in more precision, I would suggest, than maybe in neuroscience is precise, but not in psychology in the West. It's very generalized problems. But in Buddhism, it's looking into the actual mind yourself and identifying all the different, and they call them mental factors. All that means is the different states of mind. So this first category, the first way of breaking it up is into like I've been talking, the neurotic, deluded, I-based, fear-based, distorted, exaggerated, embellishing states of mind that are in the nature of suffering. Okay. Suffering meaning never being satisfied, expecting things to happen that don't happen, getting angry when they don't, and then dramas happening and all the fears and suffering of daily life. Okay, they're the root of it. Then you've got the valid, positive, optimistic, virtuous, powerful, empathetic, compassion, intelligence, joy, all these positive states of mind, love, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, now, the hardest thing to hear if we don't study it properly is that these emotional states of mind, whether it's anger or love, whether it's jealousy or kindness, this is what's the point we have when we study it. These got this massive emotional component, haven't they? That means our body is involved. The words come out, the tears, the physical body is involved with those. That's what we mean by emotional. You see a person crying, you see a person shaking, you see a person angry, you see a person shouting, then we recognize that what's happening is something is going on in their mind. The body is just the indicator. Now, our trouble is we're so addicted to the physical that we don't notice the mind until it expresses itself through the body. That's quite literally how we are. So, but the point is, the Buddhist, once you start to know the mind more, you get some more shamatha, you get some concentration. When you've calmed the body down, calmed the emotional component in your concentration, you start to hear more clearly the conceptual thoughts that inform the emotion. So anger, which we think of as violent and shouting, is a conceptual story. It's a conceptual story. Attachment is a conceptual story. Love is a conceptual story. Well, you write down the definitions of those. So love is a thought. Bare bones, it's a thought. And it's a virtuous one because it's a delight when someone else is happy. Compassion is a virtuous thought. It's empathy when someone suffers. And of course, you grow those and they become emotional. But so the bare bones is the thoughts. And it's only when we've got concentration or beginning to get concentration that we can hear the thousands, this great soup of thousands of conceptual stories all mixed together like a big soup, and we can't hear one from another until they're shouting. So this is the key job we have to do when we start to become Buddhists, by really learning to unpack and unravel these thousands of conceptual mind. So every second there's a thought. There's thousands of thoughts. So we have to start to make sense of them all. So the first way of distinguishing is between the neurotic ones and the valid ones. But now getting to George's question, there's a third category of states of mind, and I like to call these the mechanics of the mind, and that's called concentration, good memory, which is known as mindfulness, the ability to not forget what you're doing. There's one called discrimination, which is an ability to distinguish every millisecond between even just looking now with our eyes, and you're seeing 1,000 different shapes and colors in each of our rooms, isn't it, out of the corner of our eye. Discrimination is the part of our mind that's working non-stop, that can instantly recognize corner, round, white, this, blue, this, 1 inch, blue, orange, foot, shoe, boot, wood, cup, this, billions of different things. That's the capacity of this brilliant part of our mind called discrimination. Now, another one in there is called concentration. Another one is called mindfulness. Another one is called intention. Another one is called attention. Another one is called alertness. There's so many of these, and they're all doing their job automatically most of the time. Now, if some of them lack, if you start to lack mindfulness, which is the ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment, you'll become, that's what Alzheimer's is. That's what dementia is. The one called discrimination. I mean, I remember reading about a woman who couldn't any longer distinguish the shapes and things on her table. That's this discrimination literally ceasing to function. So there's all these different parts of our mind. And the point is, George, in anything we do, they're all, a million parts of our mind are all working together to have a simple experience. So there's some that prevail. Now, what is it that's called creativity? This is what's mind-boggling. You see, the Buddha's view over the long time, eons of time, the cause of us having anything at all in our world, having a body, having things, is all the product of this brilliant capacity of our mind called conceptuality. So the eons of lifetimes, we have created things. Where do you think fridges and things come from? It's from the conceptual ability to think something, and then with our hands we make something. Or you think something and you kill somebody. Everything comes from this conceptuality. So now the key capacity of attachment as a deluded conceptual state of mind, its one job is to embellish. So now you've got an artist like Bach, who seemed to me was a virtuous person. He had devotion in God. Look at the amazing sounds he created. So that we generalize that as creativity, but it's one big word for 1,000 different components. So I think you've got a mixture of this. He's got a human mind, which means he has attachment. It's just don't think of attachment as like the greed aspect. Attachment at a more refined level is the ability to embellish. So look at Bach. He had to have intelligence, brilliant intelligence. He had to have brilliant capacity for discrimination. This one I just said before. He has to have incredible mindfulness. He has to have incredible concentration. He has to have incredible virtue, love, virtue, devotion, clarity, goodness, ethics, all these qualities. But the key part that was enabled him to create brilliant sounds was this brilliant capacity for embellishing sound. So he could take a simple sound and look at his genius. So that doesn't come just from attachment. That comes from the discrimination. That comes from the intelligence. They all work together to produce what we look at or we hear as this amazing sound. And why it lifts us is because he's virtuous. Now you get another person who's brilliant at creativity. They will create the best designed gun in the planet. So they've got capability of embellishing, of being creative, attachment is creative. Attachment is creativity. It embellishes. But you get a person who's good at embellishing something, plus concentration, plus discrimination, plus good mindfulness, but lots of negativity, and they want to get the best weapon in the planet to kill people the best possible. That's what you've got there, creativity. Who cares about creativity? So mixed with virtue, that's where how you can use it on the body. It's the bodhisattva path, George. In the first level of practice, the Hinayana level, the first level of junior school and high school, there's no space for creativity. There's no space for love, sex, drugs, rock and roll. It's to calm yourself down. Give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Go to the mountains. Give up attachment. Give up anger. And then you can come down the mountain and join the bodhisattva path and be of benefit to others. Because in its nature, creating music is based on attachment. That's why artists are so brilliant, because they've got so much attachment. So you can have another variation of attachment. Look at Charlie Parker, this incredible jazz musician who was renowned for his genius ability to embellish sound. He was absolute genius, like a Bach of jazz. But he also happened to have unbelievable sensory attachment. So he would be eating chicken legs, having sex with a woman, injecting heroin and drinking alcohol simultaneously. So he died at the age of 35 because he had so much suffering of attachment. But attachment is only used, it can be used. This is the whole point about Tantra. Finally, it's utilizing this human capacity of all this brilliant conceptuality for the benefit of others. Does that make sense what I'm saying, George, a bit?
Yes, thank you. This was actually very helpful. Thank you very much.
But I had to think, you've got to think this stuff through. But the key to it is when I remember studying low rig, studying this point about everything comes down to being conceptual. And this is it's like a mechanical part of our mind. When we read when you study the Buddha's view about how conceptuality works, it's absolutely sophisticated, brilliant. You can't even imagine it. But when we talk about the concepts, the delusions, it's at the grossest level. But when we've calmed that down, the bodhisattvas utilize attachment. That's where you can learn to use brilliant technique to be an artist, to be a musician, but mixing it with virtue, George. You can mix attachment with delusion and evil. You even look at music, a person who's got a brilliant ability to embellish sound, but got very strong sensory attachment and the wish to be harmful. The music is horrible. It's like abusive. So it's the virtue, and all the bits and pieces all do their work together, but it's got to be underpinned by virtue. That's why some music lifts us, because it's driven by virtue. Do you see what I'm saying? The heart is in it, the devotion. When you read Bach, it's just so moving, his devotion, unbelievable, like guru devotion, you know. But virtue has to be virtue and goodness there. But a brilliant capability. That's intelligence mixed with that capacity to utilize his ability to embellish sound. But this genius ability to do it with brilliant discrimination. All the bits have to do their job, you know. All the bits play a role. Do you understand?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. It's very useful, but that's where it can, in the earlier part, the earlier first part of the path, George, that is to renounce all this, because it is usually based on grasping attachment as my music and my art. And that's why when we think of an artist, you say, okay, sorry, your question in particular, amazing art comes from suffering. But that's because of compassion and empathy. I mean, also amazing suffering comes from suffering. If you kill my husband and I'm angry, I'll kill you. But if you kill my husband and I've got compassion, I'll write a poem. So suffering isn't the cause of art, but if you've got virtue, it can be a catalyst for art. That's also the point. You see what I'm saying? It's what you do with it. I mean, people kill each other because of suffering. So if you've got virtue, you'll turn it into poetry or music, you know, and help others. But this cliched idea that to be an artistic person, you've got to suffer, that's just not true. No. In fact, if you've got wisdom and realize emptiness and utilize that, you're going to be the best musician in the universe because you won't be suffering. But we tend to conflate it with suffering. If you don't suffer, you don't care, we think. If you don't suffer, you don't have poetry. That's a bit naive. If you analyze it using the Buddhist analysis, you'll see it's not true. Do you understand what I'm saying? But suffering can be a catalyst if we're brave enough. That's why we want to practice, because we're using suffering as a catalyst to change. So also to help others as well is marvelous. I know what you're asking. I mean, this is the thinking from me I have to do as well. I've got to try and answer these things myself. And that's why studying this stuff began to help me it gave me the basis, you know, to try and think it through. You understand, George? Thank you so much, everybody. What else, people?
Yeah, so there's a few more questions that have come through. Actually, one was from Miss Stephanie, who was here yesterday, and today we didn't have time yesterday to ask it. So I'm going to ask it now. She's asked, the question is, when I meditate, it seems like I am divided. One part is thinking and feeling, other is watching those thoughts and feelings, and another thinks it is paying attention to all of that. Is that normal?
Yeah, of course it's normal. It's okay. But don't make it complicated. Don't get caught up in this process. There's millions of things going on in our mind all the time, you know. So the key one, if we're trying to do concentration meditation, you just try and steady it down. And you try and just decide there's the object and you try to pay attention. But of course, there are many other parts of the mind. Even when they do the analysis, for example, like we're talking now to George, there are many components involved in anything we do. So if you're doing even concentration meditation, let's look at the different parts of the mind that are working there, you know. Well, first of all, there's got to be intention. I will. Every second you're trying to say, I will keep watching my breath. That's got to be there automatically. Then you've got to pay attention. The part of your mind that does the looking is called attention. Then mindfulness is the ability to not forget what you're doing. And that's there trying to keep attention on the thing. But then even there's another one on top of that, which is exactly what that person said. And His Holiness says another part is called vigilance, which is watching the mindfulness, watching the attention, making sure they're all doing their job. Yes, it's like that. It's like when you're driving the car. The main thing is you're paying attention to every second to all the different things that you're doing, and around the corner of your eye, there are all the cars, all the things going on. There's a million parts of your mind dealing with all these millions of things. But the key factor is keeping the attention on the road and keeping your mindful so you don't forget what you're doing, and you're keeping your concentration so you don't kill yourself. But there's many other parts of your mind all working together to enable you to do that. We just think, I'm concentrating. I'm watching my breath. That's too gross, you know. It's the same with your body. It's a fact I'm holding a tissue, but let's analyze it. Which part of Robina? Her hand. Which hand? Her right hand. Which part of her hand? Her middle finger. What? And then which part? The ligaments. Which part of those? This. So you can keep analyzing, ever more subtle, ever more subtle. There's a million parts of Robina all working together to simply have the action of holding a tissue. There's a million parts of Robina's mind all working together just to watch the breath. So when we've got single pointed concentration, all the other parts calm down and everything is subsumed in this laser-like focus. That's what we're aiming for. What else?
Great. Please talk more about enthusiastic effort.
Oh, sweetheart. Well, in general terms, it's very, we can see in ordinary life, it's very necessary, you know, to have it. All the lamas say, so for this enthusiasm on the bodhisattva path, it's most advanced. It's the most necessary quality we need in order to achieve the goal of wanting to never give up being a Buddha, you know. So if we just use it in ordinary worldly terms, we can see how important it is, even just doing your job. You've got to, if you don't, no, okay, so that's general. So then the point is the Lama's saying, this makes so much sense. The only time you're going to have enthusiasm to not give up, which is what effort is, the only time you have enthusiasm is when you know the benefits of what you're trying to achieve. You know the benefits of the goal. So speaking in ordinary deluded terms, I know very well the benefits of my chocolate ice cream. So I'm going to make the effort. This is just samsara. This is not even effort, really. I'll make the effort to find out where I can get it. I mean, even just right now, you know, I've got a particular milk I drink now. I don't drink cow's milk. I've been trying all these different variations of pretend milk, right? So, you know, so I've come down to the one, it's a Canadian one, it's called Ripple. It's pea protein mostly. It's got no carbs. It's got whatever it is. I've finally found the one I want. Now I know the advantages because I want my nice tasty tea and my nice coffee. I don't want a yucky coconut taste. I don't want almond taste. I don't want oat taste. I don't want this taste. I know what I want. So because I know the benefit. Look at the effort I put into doing. Now that's not effort. That's just called attachment. But we all get the point. If you know the benefits. Of course, here we're talking the benefit of working on your mind, the benefit of practicing your path. It's harder to see that benefit. It's not that easy to see the benefit of doing a disciplined practice every day when you're dealing with your own rubbish. It's not that easy. But if you don't know the benefit, you won't persevere. It's really obvious, you know. So this is again samsaric example, but it's a good analogy. I always remember when I was living in the Bay Area, in the 90s, I remember reading in the San Francisco Chronicle or something, a story about these young guys in a startup. Always they start up in their garages. I think it must be special garages they build just for startups, you know. Maybe it was even the Google guys, I don't remember. It was the mid-90s. And I remember, and this is interesting, there are three kinds of laziness, and laziness is the opposite enthusiastic perseverance. And if we analyze this, we'll really understand it. So first, I'll talk about the Google guys in a second. So, okay, I'll use it as an example, but just a samsaric example. So the first kind of laziness is can't be bothered. Think about this. I'm not being rude, just look at it. Can't be bothered. Analyze what it is I can't be bothered doing. Well, I can't be bothered doing the thing that takes effort. So then you analyze what takes effort is what attachment doesn't want. So basically, the grossest level of laziness all the way is we want to be in our comfort zone, whatever that's mental or physical. Anything outside our comfort zone, we do not want to do it because we are addicted. Attachment is addicted to being comfortable. So that's what laziness is. So the second, you think I must do that. No, I can't be bothered because you've got to make effort. And effort means going against attachment, going against the urge to feel comfortable, again, mentally or physically. That's an ordinary example. Now, the next level of attachment, which is really coming from this one automatically, and this is a really tricky one because we think it's a virtue. You think of that job you have to do, and it's a job you don't like doing. So what do you say? First you say, oh, I can't be bothered, but then you suddenly quickly say, oh, I'll do it later, and you lie to yourself. We live our lives putting off doing the things we know we should do, but we lie and say we'll do it later. This is the worst crime against ourselves because we know later never comes, ever. In fact, the Lamas say one of the most painful ways to die when you start to die or when you're dying is to remember all the things you put off, which means, of course, your spiritual practice. I'll do it later. This is our worst crime. And what is the thing you put off doing is the thing you can't be bothered doing. And what is the thing you can't be bothered doing? The thing that attachment doesn't want. So attachment runs the show, and this is not easy to understand. We understand it, but we've got to do the analysis and be very honest with ourselves. So the worst kind of laziness, this sounds a bit weird, but it's so logical. The worst laziness, and we're talking spiritual practice here and everything, it's not possible. I can't do that. Not capable. So that's just, you stay back in your comfort zone. Now, we admire people who make effort. And again, I'm talking ordinary life as a good example. In the teachings, they're only really meaning spiritual practice. Making effort with samsara is not even effort. It's just samsara. But it's an analogy. So these 3 Google guys, or 2, whoever they were, I remember they were getting ready for their first IPO, their first initial public offering on the stock exchange, which is the dream of startups, to get the funding, then become a proper company and get investment. That was the dream, So I thought about it, and they said something like that for 6 months, they worked 7 hours a day, 18 hours a day. Now analyze this. And this is just samsara. Don't you tell me that when they woke up in the morning completely exhausted, they didn't just think, oh my God, I can't be bothered, let me just go back to sleep. But the second they remembered their goal, they leapt out of bed. Because if you didn't have a goal, of course you go back to sleep. But they remember their IPO right there, and that made them get out of bed. Now, don't tell me they would rather not have come home and relaxed in front of the television with their boyfriend or something, whoever they were, or their girlfriend. Put it off till later. No, they just remembered their goal and they persevered. And for sure, they would have had agonies of doubt. No, we can't achieve this. Not possible. Yes, we can. And they never gave up. And then the goal is achieved. So here we're talking Buddhahood. Here we're talking working on your mind. Here we're talking helping others. Here we're talking your daily practice. Here we're talking running the Buddhist Center, doing the work that's benefiting others. That's the real one we're talking about. And our daily practice even, most of us give up, can't be bothered, do it later, and then we're full of regret and guilt. You hear it all the time from people. So then what does this demand? Discipline, decisions. You've got to, and it's so difficult to be disciplined. It's so difficult to keep doing your practice whether you like it or not. Because our trouble is we think of our practice in terms of feeling good, like a baby, like a pacifier, like using a dummy, they say in Scotland and England and Australia. You got to do it because you do a little bit every day. You just got to do a little bit every day. You're molding this person into the shape you want to become. But if we do our practice based in terms of whether we feel good, I'm sorry, that's like childish. That's like you only you do your gardening when you feel good. You'll never get a garden. Whether you feel good or not, the seeds will still grow. Whether you feel good or not, doing your practice will help you change your mind. So you just got to have the discipline. And we all know we admire people who have discipline, because that's how you start to change your habits. And you know, and you don't put it off, and you go beyond your comfort zone. And then you increase your ability to go beyond your comfort zone. When you first go to the gym on the first day, you can't do more than 5 push-ups. You're exhausted. But if you persevere every day, before you know it, you can do 50. It's gradual, incremental, a little bit every day. And don't just wait for the results right there. You know, you're sowing seeds, you're practicing virtue, you're purifying your mind. You've got to have the understanding of that. And then you will not give up, and you just go one step at a time. And no matter how bad it gets, you pick yourself up and just keep moving. No matter how bad things are, no matter the difficulties, you just pick yourself up and you just keep moving, because you don't have a choice. That's it. And enthusiasm comes from that. What do you think, people? Good. We all understand. We're all familiar. And we all know when we make the effort to do it, don't you feel good? That's the point. You're so happy, you know, with yourself. That's when satisfaction comes. Putting it off and giving into attachment, it looks like it's bringing satisfaction, but it doesn't. But doing it, going against, and I don't mean to be a policeman with yourself. Relax and go to bed if you have to, but having this ability to manage yourself, so you keep moving forward a little bit every day with a bit of practice every day. It builds up, you know, and then you get real enthusiasm. And then you start to see results and you get even more enthusiasm. And you know you can do it. And then we all know we're always inspired by people who have enthusiasm. You know, just persevere one little step at a time. We all know all these lovely sayings that Mummy told us. Rome wasn't built in a day. Everything starts with the first step. All these sayings that we know, you know, you pave the way. These lovely, lovely sayings.
Do you have time for 2 more questions?
Oh, darling, go on.
From Diane, how do you know when you are too attached to the positive emotions and feelings?
Good God in heaven, if you're attached to your positive emotions, I'm overjoyed for you. God in heaven. Come on, girl. That's insane. Be delighted with yourself. It's called delighted with yourself. If you're attached, if it is attachment, then it's a fantasy. It's called delighting in your virtues. Don't be scared of being delighted in your virtues, rejoicing. That's exactly what you have to do. Oh my goodness. Go on.
Great. Another question. What role do we play when some music lifts us? Isn't it partly the fruition of our good karma?
Of course it is, yes. I don't know what you mean by the question. Of course it is. Okay, put it this way. Again, a technical answer. Every millisecond of what we call pleasure or happiness or delight, or whatever word, that's called a pleasant feeling. That is the fruit of a past virtuous seed. And the music is merely a catalyst. That's the way to answer it. That's the role you play. The music is a catalyst. Every time the person punches you in the nose and suffering arises in your mind, that moment of suffering is the fruit of a negative action in the past. The person's punch is the mere catalyst. That's the literal way to explain how things ripen, happiness or suffering. What else?
Another one came through. Someone is wondering if there are specific practices that you might recommend during these divisive and pandemic times.
Well, I think, you know, yeah, if you want practices, all the things that I've said should be practiced, but maybe a compassion practice is good. Maybe, you know, because in the end, when we really begin to understand compassion, which means when we really begin to understand suffering, which means when we really begin to understand our own suffering, which comes from delusions, then we will understand other people's suffering. And we won't just have compassion for the sick people and the dying people or the nurses. We'll have compassion for people who are harming. We'll have compassion for the crazy politicians. We'll have compassion for the pedophiles. We'll have compassion for the murderers, because everybody is in the same boat. Everybody is driven by the delusions. Everybody is driven by past karma and the blindness to this approach, that we don't realize that we are causing our own suffering and our own happiness. So having a compassion meditation for every sentient being, you could not do better than that. Also, practically speaking, too, on Saturdays, now for several months, and Lama Zopa said we need to do it until COVID-19 stops. All the Sangha around the world, the monks and nuns of our organization, are taking turns in doing half-hour meditations on a particular practice of a prayer to remove the suffering of COVID-19, including doing Om Mani Padme Hum and having compassion for all sentient beings. So anytime, it's on YouTube all 24 hours. Different monks and nuns around the world. I lead the one at 7 a.m. on Santa Fe time, 9 a.m. in New York on Saturday morning. I do 1 hour one every Saturday, and I booked myself in to do it until COVID-19 finishes. I mean, I could die first, I suppose, but I've committed to doing it. That's a practical thing you can do it in a group.
Where can we find you doing those practices on Saturday? Where can we find that?
I think it's, let me have a look. I don't know. I've just got the Zoom link. There's a Zoom link
all
you can do on
your
YouTube.
website, Robina. It's all on your website. There's information about it on the Robina Courtin.
Oh, okay. So go to and best just go to my website, and there's a calendar of all my events. And on the Saturday, every morning, 7 a.m. New Mexico time, Mountain time, and they can see that. It'll go to the website, and it'll show you the link. Yeah, go there.
Wonderful.
Thank you, darling. Well, I think it's time to go now, isn't it?
Great. Thank you so much
Right,
for your teachings today. Venerable will be teaching with us again tomorrow evening, New York time at 7 o'clock, and then into a weekend teachings both on Saturday and Sunday.
It'll be more of the same, how we create karma and how we create karma, how we get out of samsara into nirvana. That's really what I've been talking about today. We'll go into that in more detail, including karma and things. We'll do all that. And we'll talk about emptiness as well. All right, darlings. John J. Ma ke panam ke guchi, ke panyampa me pa yang, gong ne gong du pa ba shog. So may bodhicitta, may compassion grow and grow and grow in the hearts of all. All right, darlings. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, George, for that wonderful question. So such a good point, actually, to think about. I agree with. I think about it a lot, George, this one. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. All of your questions, wonderful. Thank you, sweethearts.
Thank
Much
you.
love, everybody.
You're venerable.
Thank you, darlings.